Okay, so here we go. We are going to be graphing cosine of theta using our knowledge of the unit circle. So we're going to put up a quick unit circle where we know we've got 0 and pi over 2 and pi and 3 pi over 2. And at those points, we have cosine of 1, sine of 0, cosine of 0, sine of 1, cosine of negative 1, sine of 0, and cosine of 0, sine of negative 1. Okay? All right. So now what we're going to do is, just like in middle school when we wanted to graph something that we didn't know what it was going to look like, we use an XY table. Except for this, instead of x, we have theta, but that's our independent variable, right? We're just going to plug in. And then we're going to figure out what cosine of theta is. That's our y. So we're going to go ahead and start with 0. So cosine of 0 is 1. Oh, you guys can answer. Okay. Yes, I'm recording, but you guys can also just, answer when I'm asking too. All right. So cosine of pi over 2, 0. Thank you. Cosine of pi, negative 1. Thanks. And cosine of 3 pi over 2, 0. I'm using them from the unit circle. Yep, I'm taking them from the unit circle. So these are the angles, 0, pi over 2 pi, 3 pi over 2, and the answers for cosine of those angles is in the second column. So what we're going to do is we're going to label our tick marks. I call these our tick marks. And so the first one is going to be 0. The second one is going to be pi over 2. The third one's going to be pi. The fourth one, 3 pi over 2. And I didn't finish, did I? And the last one is 2 pi. What's cosine of 2 pi? 1. Good. From the unit circle, right? Do you guys want me to pause for questions? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph. So when theta is 0, cosine of theta is 1. So, oops, let's label these. We'll say this is 1 and this is negative 1. So it's okay that our y-axis is labeled differently than our x. The distance between the tick marks is different, and that's okay. All right, so 0, 1, that point is here. Pi over 2, comma 0, that point is here. Pi negative 1, that point is here. And 3 pi over 2, 0 is here. And 2 pi 1 is here. So, we could connect these dots in a couple different ways. We could, have it look like an absolute value, but it's not an absolute value. We could take the time to say, hey, what's the value of the function when theta is pi over 4, right? It'd be root 2 over 2, which would be somewhere around here. We could go ahead and fill in more of these, but basically, you remember from last year that sine looks like this, the curving up and down and up and down. So we're going to fill in. Okay. We know that sine really keeps going, doesn't it? It keeps going. But for now, we really are just looking at graphs in one period. So if I continued, after what we just graphed, if I continued either to the right or to the left, I'm just repeating the cycle. That's one complete cycle, one complete period, and 2 pi. Okay, I'm going to pause for questions. You guys have questions? Oh, you guys good? Okay, awesome. All right, so what we're going to do is that's like the basic. That's not like the basic. That is the basic. So what we're going to do is do a little something different to it. So this time we have 2 cosine of theta. And we're going to use the same tick marks. We're going to go ahead and think about the unit circle. And we're going to say these x's, or these thetas, when theta equals these measurements, then we get an easier answer. So here we go. When theta is 0, cosine of 0, 1. Good. Cosine of pi over 2, 0. Good. Cosine of pi, -1. Cosine of 3 pi over 2, cosine of 2 pi, 1. Good. Now, here's the deal. I didn't multiply anything by 2, did I? So I wrote down what they were as far as cosine, but this is 2 times cosine. So each one of these I have to multiply by 2. So 1 times 2, 2, 0, -2, 0, 2. And now I'm going to go ahead and set up my tick marks. So I'm going to have 0 and the pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And it looks like the values of my function are going to be, the highest is going to be 2, and the lowest is going to be -2. So we'll go ahead and put this as 2, that at -2. We're going to put our dots in. So let's see, we'll have 2 and 0 and -2. And we know that we can connect these dots with the curve. All right. We also have to answer a couple things. On the bottom, we see that we have to talk about the amplitude and the period. The amplitude you can find it from looking at the graph, you can find it from looking at the equation. Basically, you find the middle of the graph, which the middle is right here on the x-axis, and you see how far away from the middle of the graph is the maximum and the minimum. So the maximum is 2 away, the minimum is 2 away, so our amplitude is 2, and our amplitude is always going to be positive. So we'll have our amplitude is 2. Okay, and then our period, we complete a full cycle going from 0 to 2 pi. So we complete a full cycle, 2 pi, and that's our period. All right, I can pause for questions.
So for the last one, it'd be 1 and 2 pi?
Hold on, I got to get better at pausing for questions. So that was a good question. I should have just kept it running. I forgot to answer the amplitude and the period here. So we can tell, we look for the middle of the graph, and the amplitude, it's 1 away from the middle and 1 away, both max and min. So the amplitude's 1 and the period is 2 pi. All right, so let's stop for a moment and, yes?
Will there ever be 2 amplitudes?
No. It's always going to be when you define the amplitude, when you look for the center of the graph, right, it's going to split it into 2 equal parts. Okay. All right. So what I wanted you guys to notice real quickly is that there are 2 ways to find the amplitude. You can either look at the graph to find it, or it's simply the number that is in front of the cosine. That's going to be your amplitude. Okay, so there's 2 ways to find it, after the fact, or you can just look at it and go, there it is. That's the amplitude right before cosine. Same thing with the first one, right? There was nothing before cosine, so that's nothing is really 1. How many cosine thetas do we have? We have 1 cosine theta. And then the other thing, the period, is this. Whatever, to find the period, you can look at the graph, or you can look at what is in front of theta. Do you see anything in front of theta? No. So if you don't see anything, it's 1, because there's 1 theta there. So you take that number and you put it under 2 pi. 2 pi divided by 1 is 2 pi. That tells you your period. So I wanted to give you another way to do period besides just looking at your graph. You actually can find it by dividing whatever this number is into 2 pi. You guys remember that from last year a little bit? No. Okay. So we're going to keep going and keep graphing, and we're going to use these same skills, but we're going to add 2 new ones, and then that's all. And then we're just going to keep going and going. All right, maybe a little more than 2 new skills. I'm not sure.
So you put whatever that number is?
Yep, whatever that number is in front of the theta, you're going to put that under the 2 pi, and that's going to give you your period.
Is it always 2 pi or
Yep, it's always 2 pi. All right, let's look at this one. We've got two things going on. The first thing, we see we have an amplitude right there, but we also see that instead of theta, we have 2 theta. So this is something where we need a new method to deal with this. When we look back at the first two that we just did, we always started our cycle at 0 and we ended it at 2 pi, right? And we do that whenever we just have theta as the angle. But when we have anything else but theta, this is what we have to do. We take whatever the angle is, and it's 2 theta. We're going to set it equal to our usual starting place. So our usual starting place is 0. That's how we're going to find our new starting place. And we're going to set the angle equal to our old stopping point. Okay, so before those first two graphs, we started at 0, we ended at 2 pi. That's when our angle was theta. So now we're going to go ahead and solve for theta. We'll divide both sides by 2. So our hash marks are still going to, did I call them? No, tick marks. Hash marks, tick marks. Okay. Are still, they're going to start at 0, but when I divide both sides by 2 here, I get that they're going to stop at pi. So this is something new. When we see that we're going to complete a full cycle from 0 to pi, so we're going to squish it. And so we're going to go to our table, and we make our table. We're going to start with 0, and we're going to end with pi. Now, before I can put the rest of my table in, let's do my tick marks. So here's the deal. We're going to start at 0. Then we're going to count over, we're going to jump over 4 more tick marks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we know we end at pi. Okay, so we start at 0, we end at pi, and now we got to figure out the 3 tick marks in between. This is where it gets a little tricky. So I know that I want the halfway mark, and I know when I get the halfway mark of anything, I add the 2 endpoints together, and then I divide by 2, right? So 0 plus pi is pi, divided by 2 is pi over 2. And that's my middle tick mark. Now, fifth block had a lot of questions about this, so if you guys want me to stop, and we can do that. Then I'm going to do the same thing for this middle tick mark between 0 and pi over 2. I'll write it up here. I'll do 0 plus pi over 2, which is pi over 2. And then I'm going to divide by 2. But instead of dividing by 2, I'm going to do something that is a little easier. I'm going to multiply by 1/2, because that's the same thing, right? So, so that's going to give me pi over 4. That's going to be this tick mark, pi over 4.
So it's stretching it out.
Well, it's actually squishing it in. It's actually going to squish it. So then between this tick mark right here, I've got to go ahead and add pi over 2 plus pi. So I've got to find my common denominator. How should I rewrite pi? 2 pi over 2, right? 2 pi over 2, so then I can add these two. So I have 3 pi over 2. So that's, I was almost going to be done, but I'm not done yet, right? Instead of dividing by 2, I've got to multiply by 1/2. So that gives me 3 pi over 4. That's my final tick mark that I had to figure out, 3 pi over 4. Do you want me to pause so you guys can ask questions? Okay. So with these tick marks, now I go back to my table, and I'm going to fill my table in. I've got pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and pi. So I'm going to do with you guys what I did with fifth block, and that is I'm going to show you the long way first, because the long way always works, and it's really easy to understand, but it takes a little more time. And once you understand the long way, I'll show you the shortcut, okay? And then you can choose to do whatever else you want. No matter what, we have to do this part and this part. We have to find those tick marks. That's non-negotiable. But then there's a shortcut for graphing that I'll teach you in just a second. What was this in the red? Okay, just one second. Okay, so what we're going to do is, this is, even though I said x, this is really my theta. This is really my y, but I'm going to go ahead and plug in 0 when I see theta. So here we go. I see 3 cosine 2 times theta, so that's 3 cosine. What's 2 times 0? 0, okay? I'm going to come back and we'll figure these out, but let's just go ahead and plug in each time, because I'm just plugging in. I see 3 cosine 2 theta, so I'm going to have 3 cosine. What's 2 times pi over 4? Pi over 2. I see 3 cosine theta, so it's 3 cosine 2 theta, so it's 2 times pi over 2. You guys see where I'm getting these? Okay, you're not. So here's, I'm just plugging it into the formula. I'm plugging theta into the formula. So 3 pi over 4, I see the formula says 3 cosine, then it says 2 times 3 pi over 4, 2 times 3 pi over 4.
3 pi over 2.
3 pi over 2, good. And then my last one, I see 3 cosine, and it says 2 theta. Theta is pi, so 2 times pi is 2 pi. Okay, now we're going to go, and we're going to figure out what these all equal. So 3 cosine of 0 is what? What's cosine of 0? 1. What's 3 times 1? 3, good. What's cosine of pi over 2? 0. 3 times 0? 0, good. What's cosine of pi? -1. -1 times 3? -3, awesome. Cosine of 3 pi over 2? 0. 0 times 3? 0, good. Cosine 2 pi? 1, and 1 times 3 is 3, good. So now we're gonna move over, and we're just gonna graph these points. So we have, oops, let's see, I need to, we'll make that 1, 2, and 3, and -1, -2, and -3. Okay, so we're gonna have 0, 3, pi over 4 is 0, pi over 2 is -3, 0, and 3. So it's going to look something like this. Okay? All right, questions? Yeah.
This is, although this is more horizontally compressed than the other graph.
It is more compressed, and that shows up in the period. Yeah, since it's done, it gets its period done in a pi.
Look like
No, exactly. And that's what we're going to do. That's a really good point, Ben. So basically, to make it easier for ourselves, because if we were to scale it even, half as much as the other graph, it could be all crunched up. So we're just going to see our 5 numbers, do our 5 tick marks, and go. So it's not going to look as compressed as it should. All right, so let's finish this. The amplitude, once again, that is our 3 that comes before our cosine. Our period, once again, there are 2 ways we could do it. We could see from here that it started at 0 and it ended at pi, so then our period's pi, or we could take the number that's in front of the angle and divide that into pi, so we get that the period is pi. Isn't that cool? Like, there's 2 different ways that you can find that, but I want you to understand both of them. So the period is pi. There's no horizontal shift. The horizontal shift is whenever we start at somewhere different than 0. Okay. All right, you want me to pause for questions? Oh, not 0. I said 0. None. All right. So we're going to do one more problem the long way, and then we'll do it the short way too. All right, here we go. So we've got a lot going on. We've got, can you tell, let's just look at it. Can you tell what the amplitude is? 1/2, good. Can you tell what the period is? Yes, 2 pi, because whatever comes before the theta, we divide that into 2 pi. Okay, so we can already tell some things, but that's okay. All right, is the angle by itself, Thomas?
Maybe theta for the period.
2 pi for the period. Did I say theta for the period? Yeah, 2 pi. So we'll get to that in just a second. We will, I promise. So here we go. Our first step is always set up our angle. starting at 0 and ending at 2 pi. We're going to do this every single time that, well, really we do it every single time, because even if it's just theta, we're starting at 0, we're ending at 2 pi. All right, so let's solve for theta. Ooh, do you think we have a horizontal shift here?
Yeah.
Yep, because we're not starting at 0. We're starting at pi over 3. Here I'm going to go ahead and add pi over 3 to both sides. And if you want to see, I'm doing 2 pi plus pi over 3, which I'm going to have to change 2 pi to have a denominator of 3, which means that its numerator had to be multiplied by 3 as well. I'm adding that to pi over 3. So, oh, isn't that great? Our theta is 7 pi over 3. I can't wait for these tick marks. I lost you? Okay, hold on. Okay, now I need to go ahead and set up my tick marks. So I know I start with pi over 3. So I write pi over 3 down. This is what I'm going to do, guys. Whenever we have a shift, I'm just shifting it over just 1. So I'm just shifting over and saying, hey, see this first tick mark? It's pi over 3. Okay. Then I'm going to count over 4 more tick marks. So I'm going to jump 1, 2, 3, 4. I made 4 jumps. I know my last tick mark is 7 pi over 3.
So you're not starting with 0.
Nope, because now it told me I can't start with 0. I have to start with pi over 3, and I have to finish the cycle by 7 pi over 3. Yes?
So then to find the one in the
Yep.
middle, you just divide by 2.
You just add the 2, right? We're going to find the one in the middle. So we'll find this one first. So we'll add pi over 3 to 7 pi over 3. We'll get 8 pi over 3, but we're not done, because then we have to divide by 2, which is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. So that's going to give me 8 pi over 6, which I'm going to reduce to 4 pi over 3. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the next one. I'm going to find the middle between pi over 3 and 4 pi over 3. To find the middle, you add the 2 endpoints, and then you divide by 3. Then you divide by 2, or we multiply by 1/2. It's the same thing, which gives us 5 pi over 6. So that's our other tick mark. Then we'll do the same thing for the other tick mark. So 4 pi over 3 plus 7 pi over 3 is 11 pi over 3 divided by 2 multiplied by 2. That's 11 pi over 6, right? Okay. So they're not pretty. So I'm going to set up the table, but then I'm going to show you the shortcut, because we've done one with the long way. I think you guys can handle it. So here we go. Here's the table. We've got our theta, and then what the value of our function is. So we're going to start at pi over 3. Then we'll have 5 pi over 6. 4 pi over 3. 11 pi over 6. And 7 pi over 3. Okay. You guys good with the table? Mm-hmm. All right, so the old way, the long way, which you could still do, is this. You can see the whole equation, and you can write it out. You can say, I see 1/2, I see cosine, oh, there's my theta, so my theta is pi over 3 minus pi over 3, okay? And we can get what? What's cosine of 0 is 1. 1 times 1/2 is 1/2, okay? And we could do it again. We could say, all right, I'm going to just plug in okay, that would be 5 pi over 6 minus 2 pi over 6, which is 3 pi over 6, which is pi over 2. What's cosine of pi over 2? 0, and 1/2 times 0 is 0. I could keep going. Do you want me to keep going? Okay, I'm going to keep going because then we're going to, this is a good idea. Let's just finish this and then do the shortcut 2 with this. So you can see both ways. You can decide which way you want to do it. The next one, I'm going to do the same thing. 1/2 cosine. I'll put 4 pi over 3 minus pi over 3. Let's say that's 3 pi over 3, which is pi. So cosine of pi, -1. 1/2 times -1 is -1/2. So we're going to continue to just plug and chug. This next, yes.
So when you're doing these shorts, is it automatically going to go from like positive to 0 to
See, your brain's already getting itself ready for the shortcut. Yep. All right, so here we go. 11 pi over 6 minus 2 pi over 6 is 9 pi over 6, which is 3 pi over 2. Cosine of 3 pi over 2 is 0. 0 times 1/2 is 0. So you guys are you're seeing what the shortcut is, aren't you? You don't have to do this table, but you can. You'll have time on the test if you want to do the table. Let's see this last one, 1/2 cosine. So we'll have 7 pi over 3 minus pi over 3. So that's going to be 6 pi over 3, which is 2 pi. Cosine of 2 pi is 1. 1 times 1/2 is 1/2. All right. So let's go ahead and finish this the long way, and we'll come back and we'll talk about how we could have gotten this a lot quicker. So we've got a 1/2, we've got a -1/2, and when we graph our points, we've got, hi, thanks. All right, so we've got, not sure who that is. All right, so we've got, yeah. So pi over 3. So pi over 3 is 1/2. And yeah, it's still recording. 5 pi over 6 is 0. 4 pi over 3 is -1/2. Back to 0, back to 1. Okay. All right. So let's finish amplitude. If we put our hand in the middle, how much higher is it? How much lower is it? It's 1/2. We could have also noticed that just by looking at the equation. The period from, if we wanted to look at pi over 3, because from pi over 3 to 7 pi over 3, that distance between those two is 2 pi. But you could also just look and see, oh, there's nothing in front of the theta. So that's a 1. So 2 pi over 1 is equal to 2 pi. So our period's 2 pi. And then our vertical shift, we can just see, our horizontal shift, we can just see it starts at pi over 3. So that's our horizontal shift. So we can look either at the graph or we can look at what comes after the theta for our horizontal shift. Okay. A lot of times, maybe sometimes on the test, it might say to the left or to the right. So we would say shifts to the right. It's not asking us right now. Okay, let's talk about the shortcut. What do we, yes?
So, wait.
Okay.
The period is.
Wait. Pause was this, right? Okay, so here's a shortcut. What do we know about cosine? We know some things about it. It's very cyclical. It goes up, middle, down, middle, up. And cosine, without having anything else happening to it, always is 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. And then it keeps going, repeats it. 1, 0, -0, 1. Okay, you have to be able to use a shortcut, you have to know that that's the cycle that cosine does. Okay? When you know that, watch. Instead of 1, 0, -0, I'm sorry, 1, 0, -1, 0, 1, we have 1/2, 0, -1/2, 0, 1/2. And the only reason why is because we've got this 1/2 there. So here's what I'm going to say. Here's a shortcut. Here's a shortcut. Once you set up your tick marks, you can ignore, you don't even have to do all of this work here. You can just say to yourself, well, I know that this part right here is going to be 1. This part right here is going to be 0. This part right here is going to be -1. This part right here is going to be 0. I don't have to plug it in. I just know these things, okay? Because that's what, and then all you have left is just to multiply by the amplitude. Yeah?
You just, instead of even writing any of that, just know that like the number in front of the cosine.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yep. There are a lot of different shortcuts, even shorter. You don't have to do this table. The next one I'll do the shortcut with the table, but without all this mess, and you can see what that looks like.
But every time you still have to do the
Yep. You have.
theta thingy.
Yep. You always have to do this part. You always have to do this part, and you always have to do this part. There are no shortcuts for those. But after that, to plot the points, that's the shortcut. Do you want me to pause it? Does anyone else have questions? Okay. All right, let's do the next one. All right, first step I have to do, there's no shortcut. This whole thing, I have to set it equal to 0, because that's where that whole thing usually starts, and then it ends, that whole thing usually ends at 2 pi. But now reality sets in, we have to solve for theta. Tell me if you want to stand up, that might help. All right, so here we go. Let's solve for theta. Oops, no, it's for 0. So I'm going to go ahead and add 4 pi to both sides. I'm just going to show my work so that you guys can. Okay. And then see for theta, to solve for it, I've got to divide both sides by 2 pi. And we're going to get the really cool answer of 2. So that's really cool. And then when we do the other side, we'll add 4 pi to both sides. So we'll get 2 pi theta equals 6 pi. We'll divide both sides by 2 pi. So we'll get that theta ends at 3. So we start at 2, and we end at 3. What's our period going to be? How far is it from 2 to 3? 1. Our period's going to be 1. We also could have known our period because, right, our period is 2 pi divided by whatever number is in front of theta. So that gives me 1. Okay, so my period's 1. Let's do the hash, I call them the hash now, they're tick marks. At least that's what I call them. So I know this is a 1. I'm going to move over. We'll move over 1 just because that's obviously going to be a 2. So then I'm going to jump. Oh, no, let's not do that. That's a bad idea because that's a really bad idea. Let's just say that we're going to jump over and make our first one 2. We know that we're doing a horizontal shift of 2. We know we're going to jump to 4 tick marks, so jump to 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll write 3. That's going to be our final tick mark for our period. And then to find the middle, we're going to do 2 plus 3 is 5, divided by 2 is 5 halves. We're going to leave it like this. We don't want to do decimals unless we have to. All right, then we're going to do the middle between 2 and 5 halves. So that's the same thing as rewriting 2 as 4 halves. So we'll have 9 halves, but divided by 2, that's 9 fourths. That's a really pretty number. So that'll be 9 fourths. And then finally, we've got from 5 halves to 3. We're going to change our 3 to be what, 6 over 2. So we'll have 11 halves, but we've got to divide it by 2, so we'll have 11 fourths. And that's the last tick mark we needed to find. So once again, there's no shortcut for what we just did. Now the shortcut comes. Some of you don't have to do the table for the shortcut. I'm just going to do the table so we have a visual for what the shortcut would look like. And here we go. We've got the 2 and the 9 fourths, and we really don't even have to write this part, but I want to give you a visual for the shortcut. Here's what the shortcut looks like. It says, I know what cosine looks like. It looks like 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. But, okay, 5 minutes, but I'm looking up here, and there's something going on to these numbers. They're being multiplied by 3, and then a 4 is being added to them. So you can do it in your head. You can say 1 times 3 is 3, plus 4 is 7, right? But that's what's happening with each of these numbers. So it's still a shortcut. I'm not plugging anything in. I'm just saying, hey, I normally am at 0, but I know that I have to multiply by 3 and add 4. Okay, can you see why? This part says, let me see if I can switch to black. This part we already know the answer to. That's our 1, 0, negative 1, 0, 1. The 3 is what we have to multiply by, and the 4 is what we have to add. Does that make sense? Okay. So with negative 1, we've got times 3 plus 4, so that's what? Negative 3 plus 4 is 1. Then 0 times 3 plus 4 is 4. And finally, 1 times 3 plus 4 is 7. You don't have to make the table. You can do the shortcut in your head, right? All right, let's do the table. I'm going to put some more tick marks on my y-axis. Can you skip? Oh gosh, we're already being so lazy. Let's go ahead and make sure we get these. All right, so let's see. It's going to be 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we'll start. Oh, don't do what I was just about to do. Look, I was just about to start at 0. We're starting at 2. So it's 2, 7. Then it's 9 fourths 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to get rid of all this work. Yeah, yeah. 9 fourths would be 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we've got 5 halves is 1, and then we go back up, right, to 4, and then 7. Okay. Questions? Let's finish what's below. Amplitude we already knew is the 3. You can find it either from looking at the equation or looking at the graph. The period, we know, we already just talked about that. It's 2 pi over 2 pi, which is 1. Or we could figure out starting from 2, ending at 3, that's 1 period. The horizontal shift, I'll answer you in just a second. The horizontal shift is 2 right here. Or we could find the horizontal shift by the equation. All right, remember how last time I told you, let's go back. Last time I told you that the horizontal shift could be found by this thing that follows theta? Almost, but not all the way. It really is that thing divided by what comes in front of your theta, okay? So that's what we're going to have to do here. If we want to do the we can easily do the vertical shift by just looking here. But also I want you to know that the vertical shift will be 4 pi divided by whatever's in front of the theta, which is 2 pi, which gives me a 2. I need you to know it both ways because next class when we do the backward ones, we're looking at the graphs and trying to figure out what equation it is. We need to understand that stuff. All right, we're going to pause here.
So it's the vertical.
All right, let's finish this one. Yes, the horizontal shift we just said was 1, and is 2. Thank you. And the vertical shift, we're going to go to the middle. Basically, we go to the middle of the graph, and we see that our middle usually is always at 0. So where is it now? It went up 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can do it that way, or we can do it by looking at the equation. And the equation, this plus 4 gives us the vertical shift. Thank you for reminding me to finish that one. Okay, this is a lot of formal stuff. We're just going to ignore it right now. If you like the formal stuff from last year, which you probably were taught really formally, if you remember it all. All right, so here we go. We're going to do graphs of sine. We're going to still refer to the unit circle. We're still going to go from 0 to pi over 2 to pi to 3 pi over 2 and to 2 pi, just like we did with cosine. All right, here we go. Sine of 0. 0. Sine of pi over 2. 1. Sine of pi. 0. Sine of 3 pi over 2. And sine of 2 pi. 0. Okay, so let's go ahead and set this graph up. We'll have our tick marks.
Isn't this literally the same graph we just had, just shifted over?
Oh, that probably.
Oh, you said backwards.
All right. He said shifted, shifted. All right. So, okay. So here we go. 0 is 0. Pi over 2 is 1. Pi is 0. 3 pi over 2 is -1, and 2 pi. And we're going to have that same curve to it. So sine and cosine look a lot alike, except for cosine starts at 1 when x is 0, when theta is 0, and sine starts at 0. And the way we're going to remember that is, of course, sine starts at 0. Sine 0. Trust me, the cornier is, the cornier it is, the more you'll remember it. The more corny, there we go. Cornier, okay, so here we go. So sine 0, but still the same pattern. 0, 1, 0, -1, 0. Okay, questions on this? All right. Oh, by the way, once again, it starts at 0, ends at 2 pi. The aptitude is 1, or the amplitude. I'm gonna do all my different A words. The amplitude is 1, and the period is 2 pi. So let's fill that in. All right, here we go. We're going to do the long part that we have to do, and then we'll do a short part. What am I going to set? Theta minus pi over 2 equal to? 0, thank you. And then it ends at 2 pi. Okay. So let's solve for theta. We're going to add pi over 2 to both sides. So theta starts at pi over 2. We can see we have a shift, a horizontal shift. And then over here, we're going to add pi over 2, which would be 4 pi over 2 plus pi over 2 is 5 pi over 2. So then let's set up our tick marks. We're just going to pick one tick mark away from the origin, and then we'll jump over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our last tick mark in our period is 5 pi over 2. All right, let's have fun. Let's find the middle. So pi over 2 plus 5 pi over 2 is 6 pi over 2. Multiply that by 1/2, you'll get 6 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 2. Then let's find the middle ground between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. That's 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi divided by 2 is pi. And let's add 3 pi over 2 to 5 pi over 2. That's 8 pi over 2, which is 4 pi. 4 pi divided by 2 is 2 pi. Okay. All right. So here's an interesting thing. We know that sine is, the pattern is 0, because sine 0, right? 0, 1, 0, -1, 0. So that would account for this. I'm trying to do the shortcut without using a table. That's really what we would be graphing if we didn't have this part. So this part says times -1/2. So really instead, 0 times -1/2 is still going to be 0. 1 times -1/2 is -1/2. 0, +1/2, 0. So these are our new points that we're going to graph. Those are our y values. So we'll have 0, then we'll have, let's make this a -1/2, +1/2. So 0, -1/2, 0, +1/2, 0. And we're done. Let's see what they asked us to do. I know I'm going fast, so you can ask me questions in a second. Let's see. So the amplitude is going to be 1/2. Remember, amplitude is positive. So we can always get the amplitude by looking at the number right in front of the sign. So amplitude's 1/2. Period, we can either see that from pi over 2 to 5 pi over 2, that's a distance of 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi. Or we can see that the number in front of the theta is 1, and when you divide 2 pi by 1, you get 2 pi. So either method, the period's 2 pi. The horizontal shift, we can see where we start. Pi over 2, that's a horizontal shift. We also can see that the horizontal shift is this divided by that. So pi over 2 divided by 1 is pi over 2. And then we didn't have a vertical shift, did we? All right. You guys have questions on this?
I thought
The period is 5 pi over 2.
The period is, it ends at 5 pi over 2, but it starts at pi over 2. Okay? So 5 pi over 2 minus pi over 2 is 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi. All right. So we have the backward ones left. All right, so let's look at this backward one. It looks like its period is 2 pi, right? That's a 2 pi. And it looks like it starts at 0. So what is it? Y equals, is it going to be sine or cosine? Sine is 3 sine.
Theta.
Good. Okay, so I don't think you're going to have any of these today, but on our second day of graphing sine and cosine, you'll have.
So,
Yeah.
so how do you do the
Okay, hold on. Okay. Let's look at this one. We're looking at from 0 to 2 pi, but it's going 10, 0, negative 10, 0, 10. What would do that? Who starts at 1, 0, negative 0? That's cosine. But what's its amplitude? 10. So the amplitude goes first, cosine theta. Or you could use cosine x, either way. All right, this one is going 0, negative 2, 0, positive 2, 0. So sine starts at 0, but good. So its amplitude is 2, but it's the negative 2 that causes it, instead of it going 0, 1, 0, it's going 0, negative. So it's a negative with the amplitude. And one last one. I don't know why I think these are challenges. Let's see. So this has to be cosine because it's not starting at 0. So it would be, it would be a negative cosine. So it's going to be negative 3 cosine theta. Okay, let's look real quickly. I don't know if the homework is on here, so I'm going to write it I have a few students that are out. I'm changing the homework. So the homework is on, do you guys see where the homework is? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. No vocab check. Cross through 1 through 4. For those of you that are watching this and didn't attend class, you're doing 2, 4, 10. Okay, guys, cross out 16, 18, 23, 28, and 32. Yep, cross out 16, 18, 23, 28, and 32 from your homework. That's right here on your sheet. And then in its place, put 39, 45, that's right. Then let's go ahead and put 46, and after that's 49 and 75. It's not bad at all. So once again, we're going to have a second day on this type of graphing. And we are done with the recording.